They told you it was just one man, one bullet, one tragic day in Dallas. But what if everything you've been told about the assassination of John F. Kennedy was a carefully crafted lie? What if behind Lee Harvey Oswald stood not just a confused defector, but a global network of power, a tangled alliance of intelligence agencies, industrial dynasties, foreign governments, and remnants of a regime the world thought defeated? Tonight, we peel back the veil. This is the hidden machine, the J.F.K. files, Israel, the Rockefellers, and the Nazi web that never died. The U.S. government released over 63,000 previously classified documents tied to the Kennedy assassination. The mainstream media, of course, points to Oswald's trips to Mexico, CIA surveillance, and a few cryptic notes. But buried in the folds of those pages were connections they never wanted us to make. Let's begin with the CIA surveillance of Oswald in Mexico City. He met with Cuban and Soviet consulate officials. That's the official story. But a declassified memo reveals something more. Oswald was in contact with a man codenamed Liron, a deep-cover Mossad asset operating out of Mexico under the guise of a cultural attaché. Why would Mossad care about Oswald? Because J.F.K. had made it clear he didn't want Israel to obtain nuclear weapons. In July 1963, just months before his assassination, he demanded inspections of the Dimona nuclear facility. That same month, he received a furious letter from then-Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, who resigned immediately after. Coincidence? Think again. Documents show that the CIA was not only working with mafia figures to kill Castro, but also with private banks to launder black budget funds. These banks were tied directly to the Chase Manhattan Bank, where David Rockefeller had immense control. This same bank had quietly backed Nazi Germany before World War II. And now, 2 decades later, its tendrils reached into Langley, the Pentagon, and beyond. Ask yourself, why would a Rockefeller-funded institution be involved in laundering money for CIA black operations? Because they weren't just laundering money. They were managing access to influence, to silence, to secrets. And JFK? He was standing in the way of the Federal Reserve reforms. He had signed Executive Order 1111 aimed at stripping the Fed's monopoly and returning currency control to the U.S. Treasury. That move alone was enough to earn him enemies in the world's deepest pockets. But this goes further. Hidden among the declassified documents is a chilling reference to Operation Paperclip Phase 2. You've heard of Operation Paperclip, the post-World War II program to bring Nazi scientists to America. But what they don't tell you is that many of these individuals didn't just work in rocket science. Some of them became psychological warfare experts, interrogators, covert chemists for MK Ultra. One memo, dated 1961, links a former Nazi intelligence officer, name redacted, with a visit to a ranch in Texas, owned by, you guessed it, a Rockefeller oil affiliate. That officer would later be traced to meetings with anti-Castro Cuban exiles and CIA psychological ops teams. What were they planning? An event, according to the memo. An event that would recalibrate the American psyche. Is that what Dealey Plaza was? So here's the picture so far. JFK tries to stop Israel from getting nukes. JFK tries to sideline the Federal Reserve. JFK rejects a secret CIA plan called Operation Northwoods, false flag attacks to justify war with Cuba. And in the shadows, Mossad, the CIA, ex-Nazis, the Rockefeller Empire, a triangle of influence with one common goal: remove the man who was about to dismantle their control. And they used Oswald, but maybe not in the way we think. In one file, an unredacted paragraph from the FBI mentions Oswald calling a number in the US, a line traced to an address in New Orleans. That address was tied to a chemical firm with loose links to a defense contractor who had received funds through a Chase-controlled trust. How many more threads do we need to connect before the picture becomes clear? But we're not done, because there's one more player in this global game, and their role changes everything you thought you knew. We've connected the dots between Israel, the Rockefellers, and the CIA's secret dealings with ex-Nazi operatives. But there's one more player. One shadowy force that has been carefully hidden from the public eye. And when you see their fingerprints on the Kennedy assassination, you'll understand why they never wanted these files released. In the newly released JFK files, there's a single, seemingly insignificant memo dated September 25, 1963. It references a German industrialist meeting with CIA officials in Argentina. That industrialist? Hans Globke. Never heard of him? You should have. Globke was a top-ranking Nazi official during Hitler's reign, one of the architects behind the legal framework of the Third Reich. He was instrumental in drafting laws that led to mass confiscations and deportations. And yet, instead of being tried at Nuremberg, he was quietly absorbed into NATO intelligence. By 1963, he was working behind the scenes, coordinating economic and intelligence operations in South America. Now here's the shocking part. According to the declassified memo, Hans Globke had connections to Otto Skorzeny, Hitler's most feared commando. Skorzeny had become a CIA asset after the war, running secret paramilitary networks across Europe, the Middle East, and Latin America. And where does this all tie back to JFK? Mexico City. Lee Harvey Oswald's infamous visit to the Cuban and Soviet consulates in Mexico City was not just a spur-of-the-moment trip. New documents reveal that he may have been under the surveillance of an intelligence group linked to ex-Nazis operating out of Argentina and Mexico. This is where it gets chilling. Another declassified file mentions a Munich-based financial network that had been channeling money through American and European banks, including, yes, Chase Manhattan Bank, controlled by the Rockefellers. That financial network? A Nazi slush fund. The same memo states that Oswald's name came up in internal discussions among West German intelligence officers in early 1963. Why would the German intelligence community be interested in Oswald months before JFK's assassination? Because Oswald wasn't just a rogue assassin, he was a pawn in a larger game, used, manipulated, and ultimately discarded by forces operating far beyond him. Now, let's go deeper. JFK's greatest enemies weren't just in Washington. They were in the corporate world, in foreign governments, and in secret intelligence groups still operating long after World War II supposedly ended. He had made 3 fatal mistakes. He threatened the Federal Reserve's power, the Rockefeller connection. He challenged Israel's nuclear ambitions, the Mossad connection. He rejected CIA black operations, many of which were being run by ex-Nazis, the Nazi underground connection. Still think it was just Oswald? Let's return to the Rockefeller Nazi connection. One of the most overlooked pieces of the JFK assassination puzzle is the Warren Commission's secret financial backers. Hidden in the files is a letter from a senior CIA officer discussing the commission's funding. A portion of that funding, according to the letter, came from private industry partners. Who were these partners? A network of multinational corporations, including firms that had deep wartime connections to Nazi Germany. This isn't speculation. This is in the declassified documents. One such corporation, IG Farben, was directly linked to Rockefeller oil interests. It was also a major supplier to the Nazi war machine. Here's the terrifying reality. JFK wasn't assassinated by a single gunman. He was eliminated by an entire system, a network that combined intelligence agencies, industrial powerhouses, and global financiers. The same forces that brought Nazi scientists into the US after World War II. The same financial elites that profited from both sides of global conflicts. The same intelligence networks that would later orchestrate coups in the Middle East and Latin America, all had a stake in JFK's removal. They wanted him gone, and they got what they wanted. They told you it was just Oswald, a lone, confused man. But what we've uncovered shows a machine so vast, so connected, that his role was merely that of a pawn. One small piece in a plan decades in the making. By now, you understand that the JFK assassination was not an isolated event. It was the culmination of an international power struggle, with tentacles stretching into the CIA, Wall Street, Nazi Germany, and a secretive financial empire that spanned continents. We've linked Oswald to Israeli intelligence, the Rockefeller financial web, and ex-Nazi operatives embedded in global power structures. But there's still more. Because once we pull this final thread, we see something far darker, something that reveals an agenda decades beyond Kennedy's death. Let's talk about what happened after the assassination. A little-known document, buried deep within the newly released files, shows that on the very same day Kennedy was assassinated, an emergency meeting took place in Houston, Texas. This was not a meeting of grieving officials. This was a financial summit. In attendance, David Rockefeller, representatives from Chase Manhattan Bank, 2 executives from Gulf Oil, a German banker with deep post-war ties to Swiss banking institutions. What were they discussing? An offshore financial shift, a movement of capital so vast that it rerouted the entire trajectory of American foreign policy. Within 24 hours of Kennedy's death, a massive transaction moved funds from Chase-controlled accounts into newly formed investment vehicles offshore. And then there's this. A memo from the Federal Reserve dated November 26, 1963, just 4 days after JFK's death. The memo describes the reversal of certain proposed executive orders. You already know what this means. One of JFK's last acts as president was signing Executive Order 11110, effectively challenging the Federal Reserve's dominance over the U.S. monetary system. His death ensured that order was never fully enacted. And who benefited? The same international financial institutions that had links to Nazi-era funding networks, the same ones that helped rebuild post-war Germany and funneled money into secret intelligence programs. But wait, it gets worse. Because while Washington mourned, another group gathered, this time in Argentina. A telegram found in the declassified files references a meeting between former Nazi intelligence officers in Buenos Aires. The topic? Finalizing financial strategies in light of the situation in the United States. Let's decode that. These weren't just ex-Nazi officers. These were deeply connected intelligence figures, men who had survived the war, integrated into American and Soviet intelligence networks, and continued operating from the shadows. And they had just lost one of their biggest threats. Do you see the picture forming? JFK wanted to dismantle the intelligence machine. JFK wanted to prevent nuclear proliferation. JFK wanted to weaken the Federal Reserve. And what did he get? They got what they wanted. But what they didn't expect was the cracks in their own cover-up. Because you see, even the most well-orchestrated assassinations leave behind breadcrumbs. And the breadcrumbs we've found? They lead straight to Israel's nuclear ambitions, the Rockefeller dynasty's empire, and a secret Nazi shadow network that never really died. The official story was simple. Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone and disturbed gunman, fired 3 shots from the Texas schoolbook depository. End of story. Case closed. But if that were true, why did J. Edgar Hoover personally write a memo mere hours after JFK's death, stating that public credibility needed to be carefully managed to avoid mass speculation? And why did newly released documents reveal that Hoover himself was warned about Oswald weeks before the assassination, but ignored it? Because Oswald wasn't meant to be stopped. He was being used. The Israel connection. The Dimona factor, one of the biggest redacted sections of the JFK files, now declassified, contains direct references to Dimona, Israel's top-secret nuclear facility. What was Kennedy's greatest foreign policy battle behind the scenes? Not Cuba, not Vietnam. It was Israel's nuclear weapons program. Newly released State Department cables confirm that Kennedy was actively pushing Israel's Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion to allow inspections of Dimona. Kennedy feared that if Israel developed nuclear weapons, it would destabilize the Middle East and lead to global catastrophe. Ben-Gurion refused. Then, in July 1963, JFK sent another demand. He was determined to shut Dimona down. And then, just 1 week later, Ben-Gurion resigned. Why would one of Israel's most powerful and influential leaders suddenly step down after ruling for over a decade? Some believe he had inside knowledge of what was coming. The Rockefeller pipeline, the Chase-Manhattan connection. Now, let's talk money. New files reveal banking records linking the Rockefeller-controlled Chase-Manhattan Bank to intelligence front companies. One of these front companies? Permindex. Sound familiar? Permindex is the same mysterious corporation that New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison uncovered during his investigation into JFK's assassination. What was Permindex's real function? It was an intelligence laundering front, a middleman organization used to funnel CIA and foreign intelligence funds into covert operations, including assassination programs. Sound cue, deep mechanical hum like gears turning in the dark. And who were the main financiers behind Permindex? The Rockefellers. International Zionist financiers, wealthy European elites. Their mission? To remove global leaders who oppose their plans for worldwide control. And JFK? He stood in their way. The Nazi underground, Operation Paperclip's next phase. Now let's talk about something that should send chills down your spine. Operation Paperclip didn't end with bringing Nazi rocket scientists to America. It expanded. It became an intelligence pipeline, absorbing SS officers, Nazi scientists, and psychological warfare experts into the CIA and NATO intelligence networks. Newly declassified J.F.K. files confirm that the CIA actively protected ex-Nazi officers from war crime prosecution in exchange for their cooperation in covert operations. A group of former Nazi intelligence operatives were running clandestine missions in Latin America, backed by American corporations and deep state financiers. A senior Nazi officer, Hans Globke, personally oversaw the integration of XS intelligence networks into the West German government, with U.S. approval. And where was one of these Nazi networks operating from in 1963? Mexico City, where Oswald was last seen meeting with mysterious intelligence contacts. And what else was in Mexico City? A Rockefeller-backed banking firm laundering money for intelligence operations. What this means: the Grand Design Oswald, Mossad, the CIA, Nazi intelligence networks, the Rockefellers. You think these are separate stories? They're not. They are different faces of the same machine. A machine that removed J.F.K. because he threatened to expose Israel's nuclear weapons program, dismantle the Federal Reserve System, weaken the CIA's grip over international operations, shut down covert Nazi-linked intelligence networks. They erased him because he was too dangerous, because he saw through the illusion. But now we see through it too. The hidden machine is real, and it never stopped running no dealing. You wanted the truth, and now you're staring straight into it, because this story, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, isn't just about a man, a bullet, or a city in Texas. It's about control, power, the war between light and shadow. And we're only now beginning to understand how deep the shadows truly go. Let's go further. The kill chain. The files show us something else, something buried. The kill chain, the actual logistical pipeline that put Lee Harvey Oswald in the right place, at the right time, with the right weapons, was built on the back of covert alliances. One memo, long classified, finally revealed details of a tri-nation intelligence task force involving the CIA, Israeli Mossad, and West German intelligence, BND. The justification? Containment of rogue state nuclear development. But that's not all it said. The next line is what sends chills down your spine. The Kennedy problem must be neutralized before Q4. His resistance to Dimona and détente threatens joint interests. Read that again. The Kennedy problem must be neutralized. That memo was dated October 4, 1963, less than 2 months before JFK's death. It was circulated to 3 offices. One of them was a CIA field station in Miami, the same city housing dozens of anti-Castro Cuban assets, many of whom were on the CIA's payroll. Oswald was connected to these groups, not by theory, by paper trail, by training overlaps, by confirmed contacts. And he wasn't the only one. Jack Ruby, the man who killed Oswald on live television, had known ties to organized crime, but also made frequent trips to Israel and held unusually warm relationships with known Mossad sympathizers. Why would a nightclub owner with no official ties to intelligence feel compelled to kill Oswald? Unless he knew too much. Now, let's talk about the cleanup crew. The cover-up began immediately. Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in within hours. Hoover sent internal memos declaring it was vital that the public never believed there was more than one shooter. Why? Because to allow multiple shooters would mean conspiracy, would mean accountability. And accountability would crack open the world's most dangerous power structures. Newly released FBI and CIA files confirm that dozens of witnesses reported hearing multiple shots from different directions. Even more disturbing, a list of names. Individuals interviewed by the Warren Commission who mysteriously died within months of giving testimony. Dorothy Kilgallen, the journalist who said she was going to blow the case wide open, found dead under strange circumstances. David Ferry, Oswald's known associate, found dead before he could testify. George de Mohrenschildt, Oswald's handler, dead by suicide. And the list goes on. Cleanup, erasure, silence, all orchestrated by a system that couldn't afford exposure. The bloodline equation. Now, we need to talk about legacy, bloodlines. The ones who survived these events never survived by accident. The Rockefellers didn't just fund wars, they built economies, they bought governments, they placed presidents, and who else was in close alliance with them during the post-war period? The early architects of what would become the State of Israel. The very same individuals JFK clashed with. This wasn't just a political assassination, this was a ritualized reset of power. a coordinated effort to ensure that the world stayed on a path chosen by shadow elites. JFK wasn't just a president, he was a disruption. And disruptions are deleted. You've heard the facts, you've seen the patterns, you feel the truth in your gut. So now, ask yourself, if they could silence a president with the world watching, what else have they done in the dark? You've followed the trail this far, and now we stand at the edge. We've uncovered the financial ties, the geopolitical stakes, the intelligence networks, and the kill chain. But there's one final piece of the puzzle, one that ties everything together. JFK wasn't just removed, he was sacrificed, not just for power, not just for control, but for something even older. Something that echoes through history, hidden in plain sight. What do Lincoln, Julius Caesar, and John F. Kennedy all have in common? They were all leaders who challenged hidden power, and they were all struck down in highly symbolic ritualistic executions. This wasn't just a coup, it wasn't just an assassination, it was a ritual removal of a king figure. And history shows us this pattern repeats itself. November 22nd, 1963, the date of Kennedy's death. The same occult number sequence used in Masonic rituals. The same number that symbolizes mastery over the physical and spiritual realm. The same sequence that appears again and again in political killings throughout history. And where did JFK die? Dealey Plaza, a location with deep occult significance, named after a Scottish Rite Freemason. A site designed with symbolic geometry linked to ancient mystery schools. Coincidence, or was the location chosen? Now let's talk about the Babylonian connection. Ancient civilizations had a practice, the ritualized killing of the king. When a ruler became too powerful, too independent, he was sacrificed to appease the gods. Rome did it. Egypt did it. And today, the same forces that ruled from behind the thrones of emperors rule from behind the doors of modern finance, intelligence, and media. JFK wasn't supposed to challenge them. He wasn't supposed to stop Israel's nuclear plans. He wasn't supposed to cut off the Federal Reserve's stranglehold. He wasn't supposed to shut down covert Nazi intelligence operations. So they followed the ancient script. They removed the king, and in doing so, they sent a message to every leader after him. They didn't just kill Kennedy, they killed the conversation. And every time the truth got close, someone disappeared. Dorothy Kilgallen dead before revealing her findings. Lee Bowers died in a mysterious car crash after seeing multiple gunmen. William Pitzer, military photographer documenting JFK's wounds, found shot in his home. David Ferry, linked to Oswald, found dead before he could testify. Sam Giancana, mob boss tied to CIA operations, murdered before he could testify. One by one, gone. And the message was clear: speak out and you vanish. But here's the thing, when power is taken, it has to go somewhere. JFK was removed, but who benefited? Who still pulls the strings today? The same families, the same banks, the same intelligence alliances. The Rockefeller dynasty still holds global financial influence. The same CIA networks still operate behind closed doors. The descendants of Nazi-linked financiers still fund political campaigns. Nothing has changed, only the faces. And what happens when a new leader steps out of line? They're still playing by the same rules. The JFK files were released, not because they wanted the truth out, but because they know it doesn't matter anymore. They know people won't connect the dots. They know the machine keeps turning. But here's the thing, you connected the dots. You saw through the illusion. So now, what are you going to do about it?